Go ahead and get started if you're ready, everyone.
Getting rid of the,
Either first thing in the morning or the end.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'd like to go ahead and call to order our June Planning Commission for Kiowa Island. And we'll start with Ms. Reynolds. If you would call the roll, please.
Mr. Dowdy.
Here.
Mr. Babinet.
Here.
Mr. Capelli.
here,
Mr. Conley.
Here.
Dr. Curran.
Here,
Ms. Hennessy. Here. Mr. Iwan.
Here. Good. All here. That's always a good start. On the agenda, it may say the approval of the minutes, but we've just had them completed, but they're not reviewable yet. We're switching over to a new software program that's going to be able to help immensely with these minutes. So we'll table that and get it done the first thing next month, and we're going to go to public comments. No public comments? Okay, you'll get a second chance, okay, this year.
I will.
Okay, old business. John, you want to give us an update on Kiowa Next?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Just regarding Kiowa Next, you all were notified that we are going to essentially hit what I would call a small reset button on Kiowa Next. Staff, along with our chair, will be meeting with our consultant team. We have been at this particular process a little long, and so we want to be able to just reset it and set a schedule to outline us moving forward between now and getting this plan back to the public for public consumption. It has also been recommended and advised by our council liaison that we embarked on this particular venture as well, and so we're meeting internally essentially to ensure a reassured game plan to modify our structure to ensure that we stay on track to get the plan accomplished. What I would note, in addition to as part of that process, the recommendation of staff mentioned of us working with a smaller work team to try to advance this. We'll be pulling a smaller group of you, and which you've already been notified, Mr. Curran, Ms. Hennessy, Mr. Iwan, to at least begin a process to review documents. During our previous workshops, we've gotten a little bit bogged down in just redlining the document, and I think from a time and efficiency standpoint,
Like Joanne's comment?
Yeah, Dr. Kern, Mr. Iwan, and I have been talking, and we've set aside time next Wednesday and Friday. We would like to start our work. Will you have documents to us to work on?
yeah, so that's the goal, to have the documents prepared. So I believe by the end of this week, we'll have that. So that's what I'm working on getting,
Go ahead
so
and
that you guys can
we will
begin
plan
that,
our meeting then.
begin that process. So that's the anticipation, so that work begins immediately, if that makes sense.
We're set.
John, could you clarify exactly what the process is now? Is it simply a review of the existing document that we've already passed on? Or is it a modification to that document, and in what way and by whose direction?
So what we will do is take that small team that was just referencing and in my opinion, the entire document, primarily focused on the areas that we have not collectively seen, because those have not had the attention as detailed as the previous sections that the Planning Commission has already reviewed. But this would allow the Planning Commission to have representation to ensure that the entire document is done at least one more clean sweep before we go to the full commission, and that way it will go before our public consumption to engage the community on. As far as direction, this is a like mind between staff, our consultant team, and our council liaison, so our chairman as well. So that's
Excuse me, the processes of like mind, or,
the process, yes, yes.
and what other input have you gotten from the council liaison?
Endpoint that the Kiwanis Next, the comprehensive update, it should be a priority for the planning commission, so we should be working a little bit more quickly to get this through. This is a seriously important document for the town. It's a very important visioning for the community, and so essentially, for lack of better words, the time that we spent on, we should be moving in a little bit quicker time pace.
So the priority is Kiowa Next from the standpoint of the planning commission.
Which that has not changed. We've always had Kiwanis Next as the update of our,
For how long?
precisely.
So the next item comes up, right?
So to the point of us getting this document ready and prepared for the community to provide their feedback on is what staff is wanting to prioritize, and this small work group will help staff do that.
So anticipate for those of us who aren't involved in this next review, what the timing is for the meeting of the full commission.
So I will let that small group work it independently. I think 2 to 3 meetings, I think, should be able to accomplish
2 or 3 meetings?
two or three work sessions with that group to be able to get through that particular document. And I will let that group kind of work through it accordingly. I think they've worked together before in a great manner. I think that they could accomplish something in a reasonable time frame. Aggressively, I would say back before our next meeting, which would be in July.
Doesn't sound like it's making it a priority, though. If you're gonna basically give them another document to review of, what, 5 sections now, or whatever we got left? Or you're talking about the whole document?
The intent is for us to get a ready document. So the areas that we've already reviewed, I think I have comfortability with most of some of those elements. There might be a few things that need touch up, but I think the bulk of the immediate time will be spent on the elements that have not seen any review. And so, in my mind, you can make the argument that it is the entire document.
Those items have already been covered with the full committee. We've had a meeting, we've agreed on them. Those are final, as far as the draft goes.
Oh, I think,
Otherwise, you're gonna have to have the entire committee involved in reviewing the entire document again.
So
Yeah,
just to wrap up here, I think that the intent is not to allow none of the commissioners to have any touch on the document. This is just to advance our timeline. And so this provides this work group to be able to discuss in a more immediate fashion. When we have, you've seen it, when we had 7 members present, having a dialogue on one particular item, we get bogged down from a time standpoint. And so a smaller group helps us to stay a little bit more efficient.
thanks, John. John, let's move on to new business, and just stay where you are and start with the stormwater, if you would.
Yeah, so I want to begin this particular process by just kind of capturing an overall view of where we are. And then actually Patria St. John is going to come up and give the Planning Commission really an overview of stormwater and how I envision this particular process of sort of a phased approach for Kiowa and envisioning where we want to be from a stormwater standpoint. So today, the idea is that we are well aware of the impacts of stormwater. I think it's been duly noted in recent events regarding rain events or stormwater runoff. We've seen examples of erosion on different parts of the island. I want to first recognize 2 particular documents that I've asked you guys to familiarize or refamiliarize yourself with, one being our 2018 Flood Mitigation and Sea Level Rise Report. That was a subcommittee produced out of the Environmental Committee that really did a great job, in my opinion, of understanding where we are contextually as an island, the purview and roles and responsibility across entities, and what, per se, recommendations that could put forth to help our community be more responsive, proactive to the issues regarding flooding. Flooding has not been a issue or a topic that has not come up in any particular setting over the last several years. And so one of the things that we could address from a regulatory standpoint is our stormwater regulations. So today is for staff's intent is for the Planning Commission to really soak in a good amount of knowledge. Although there is a text amendment listed on your agenda, it's not the intent that you have to necessarily make that recommendation today. Today is really setting a foundation that you gain as much understanding, because this is not an independent thing. We want to be able to ensure that you understand how stormwater impacts other areas of planning, how it impacts development, how it actually impacts a single owner property, a single property owner. And so as part of this process, we anticipate this being a phased approach, this being what I would call the initial phase of just really getting the town the ability to have some purview, specific purview outside of what our current regulations occur of sort of directing more standards towards Department of Health and Environmental Control, DHEC, but really having some parameters and guidance to what we can do as best management practices. And so we'll outline a formula, if you will. In your materials, we try to provide as much as we can from an information standpoint, as well as some contextual elements that give you an understanding of not just where the town is, but some of the elements that are related to the community association, the efforts that they've done. We understand that Kiowa's master drainage system is not managed by the town. That's one of the complications of any particular ordinance that may be put forth, that we must be careful and uniquely positioned to ensure that the town is taking a step that respects that governance or management entity. And then additionally, when we look at stormwater, it's not just about capacity. So most times we think of end-of-pipe solutions. And so that end-of-pipe solution is what happens at the outfall or wherever it ends up, whether it's in a pond or a golf course or into the river. That's most times what folks are thinking about. But today, we want to at least begin the process to allow you to understand that there are best management practice from a low-impact development standpoint, as well as from what one property owner can do on their actual property that helps us collectively. So I'll stop there because I feel like I can go on. I don't want to steal too much thunder, but we'll let Patria come up and introduce you guys.
Good afternoon. So we're going to do a little bit of background about stormwater. So stormwater was first started to be regulated by the Clean Water Act, which was passed by President Nixon in 1972. That authorized the EPA to then start to regulate stormwater. That then EPA authorized DHEC, the state environmental agencies, to manage stormwater and for clean water purposes. So stormwater, what is it? It's runoff, it's rain. It's also, if you sprinkle too much and it runs off, snow melt in places that have snow. And it can be both urban and agriculture. Farms have water quality issues in terms of stormwater. So whatever runs off and not soaks into the ground becomes an issue. It picks up things from a water quality standpoint before it discharges. Even when it goes into the stormwater system, at some point it outfalls. So right now our master drainage system here, the stormwater goes into the pipes, goes into the ponds, sits in the ponds for whatever the outfall is, and then discharges into the river. So the quality is a lot of what we're going to talk about today in terms of what we can do from a regulatory standpoint, from the town's point of view. So how is stormwater managed? Stormwater is managed by controlling flooding, and this is where you see the hard infrastructure. This is really the water quantity that you're talking about that creates the flooding issues. So that's where you see the detention ponds, the pipes, and then the outfall. It's also controlled by the development. What is the lot coverage? What is the pervious impervious ratios? And what kind of materials allow permeation of stormwater? And then also to prevent pollution. And some of this, a lot of this, I think, is education, is for people to understand that putting fertilizer out, sometimes if it's running off into the marsh, it's going to affect the water quality. So stormwater management plan components. So again, these are the areas that we're looking at impacting. Water quantity control, and that's really the flooding. That's more to do with the flooding. Water quality control, that's what's in the water and how the pollutants discharge. Erosion and sedimentation control, that's dealing with, especially during construction, with silt fencing and controlling those kind of things. Stormwater conveyance controls. During construction, a lot of that is blocking stormwater outlets so that during construction, when you have a lot of runoff, it doesn't get into the stormwater system. A lot of best management practices deal with both the erosion and stormwater conveyance controls, and then maintenance scheduled for construction and post-construction. That's making sure your stormwater conveyance is clear. A lot of times communities will go in and they know it's coming up to be hurricane season. They'll go make sure that they clean out all the stormwater conveyances and that kind of thing. So this is kind of a cartoon, but it's very realistic. So back when they first instigated the Clean Water Act, I'm old enough to remember that, you know, there were some rivers you could set on fire. A lot of that came from direct discharge from industry into the water system. But also what can be significant in terms of water quality is agriculture, the use of fertilizers and herbicides that then also impacts the water system. And this goes on down to individual homeowners and what uses are used around somebody's home, especially when it's adjacent to water bodies. So I think I covered that. So currently, DHEC only requires a construction general permit for projects that are over an acre. So that means that approximately 2.5% of projects on Kiowa are reviewed for stormwater currently. So right now, most of the local communities like Sullivan's Island, Folly Beach, they all own their own infrastructure, stormwater infrastructure, and they have become individual utilities who deal with the stormwater, and many of them partner with Charleston County to help regulate and review the stormwater. Because we're unique and our infrastructure is controlled by a private entity, we don't have that avenue available to be reviewing some of the stormwater. So that process that most of the entities become, it's called a MS4. And there's about 70 small MS4s in the state of South Carolina. And they're regulated by DHEC. DHEC inspects them, they audit them, they require them to do a number of things. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, we are unable to go that path in terms of looking with more eyes on stormwater. So many of these MS4s actually have supplemental requirements that are stricter than DHEC, especially the coastal communities. Mount Pleasant has more, Town of James Island have supplemental standards. In fact, Charleston County has higher standards in certain areas than DHEC, and that is all permissible. So this picture was taken on Kiowa Island by a house under construction during a rain. So that is 4 piles of concrete that is currently running off into the groundwater or into the marsh. And that has really significant impact in terms of water quality. So single-family construction does have impacts on stormwater. So like, for instance, if we were reviewing this, which is something we're talking about doing, there are best management practices that would require you to have a concrete washout, which is basically straw bales with a liner. So there's some place they can dump that concrete, contain it, and remove it. It doesn't get buried on site, and it gets handled safely. So those are kind of some of the more low-impact kind of strategies of dealing with stormwater. So, did I skip one? Nope. So, our recommendations at this point are, 1, to adopt language to allow enforcement of current DHEC standards for all construction sites on the island. And we basically, I think we shared that language with you. We basically took that from what they have on the town of Sullivan's Island, that language. Develop a stormwater management plan application. That language would basically say that anybody who's doing construction needs to provide a stormwater management plan that is signed by a registered engineer or landscape architect that indicates what kind of fill is going on the site, where the drainage is going, if you're at the water, where you're going to put silt fence, kind of how you deal with construction and stormwater. And so on a single family basis, we can train our inspectors to look for those items to make sure they're following through. On larger projects, we would suggest hiring or having an ongoing consulting engineer be able to review for the larger projects to make sure they're adhering to DHEC standards and that there are inspections in place during the course of construction that allows review of those standards. And then finally, well, I think I already mentioned training the town staff to be able, when you're driving, like if I'd been driving, I didn't take that picture. If I'd been driving and took that picture and I was a town staff, I would stop and say, where's your concrete clean out? So introduction of stormwater management strategies and proposed regulatory changes. Do you want to? Or are there questions for me?
I just, well, one thing, Petrea, first of all, you've expanded my horizon. You know, when I first read the material, I was thinking you were talking about quantity control, but you're really talking about the quality of the water entering our storm systems.
Which is where we can have the most impact. We can't raise the island. I mean, you know, which is the flooding and the quantity.
We can raise the houses.
But we can, and especially multiple point sources, you know, we can educate our community, and we can also look at regulating some of the construction practices.
And that was my second point in question is that, and the other thing, so we're talking about the quality of the storm runoff at this point, and we're also trying to expand our control from less than 1 acre, essentially down to the individual house level, construction level. Is
Which
that
is
correct?
the majority of our construction.
And this is the 2 focuses that we're working on now.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joanne.
Yeah, you said the recommendation to allow enforcement of current DHEC standards. I thought one of the things that came out on the the stormwater management thing on Upper Beachwalker was that DHEC standards look back historically for a long period of time, whereas Charleston County has shortened it because historically 15 years, 20 years ago is irrelevant to what's happening today. And on the next page, you have develop supplemental blah, blah, require a higher and additional performance standards from DHEC addressing specific issues important to Kiowa. So I'd like to just make sure we're on the same page that really what we're looking at in stormwater management is a higher level than DHEC
Right,
standards?
right now, we're phasing it. So the first phase is we're just going to look at DHEC standards. Just get these contractors knowing that they're going to have to do what they have to do other places that have inspectors. They all know. They know. So it's just enforcing what we can. And our second phase, we're going to come back to you with those supplemental standards, at the higher standards.
Why not do it all at the same time?
Well, that can be a point of discussion. We thought a
I think
stepped
you're
approach
volunteering to be in
might
that committee.
But yeah, I just don't see the point. If we're going to do it, let's do it all, if we're going to change regulation, let's make it to be what we want it to be for the long term.
The only point I would make on that is that is the timing, something we can do fast to put in place right away, and then it might be, I don't know how long it's going to take to put the additional or to develop additional
If we're,
standards.
do we copy DHEC or this, what Johns Island did?
Yeah, I was going to say,
Or
there are,
James Island.
we do have examples that you
Yeah,
could.
so it shouldn't, I can't see if we're writing a reg, it shouldn't take any longer to write it one way versus the other.
We thought that about the comprehensive plan, too.
Do you have any examples of situations like ours where the infrastructure that, for the most part, affects the entire area is owned by someone else?
Well, most places, it's owned by a town
Right, no,
versus
but
a
I'm
private
talking about
entity.
A Keeker or
Right.
in the county.
In the county, no.
So in those,
Because if we owned it, because everybody else that are smaller, that are a town, become MS4s. They become
so
their
they
own
end up going
utility.
under the typical,
Right, and they partner with Charleston County to help enforce it. They all collect stormwater fees.
so they got DHEC issues, basically.
Well, so when you become an MS4, they have certain stipulations you have to do. One, you're open to audit. They can come and audit anytime. You have to do a certain amount of education, which I think we're talking to the Conservancy about doing anyway. I think we're following along a lot of what they would do, but we aren't doing it as an MS4 because we can't, because we don't own the
And really,
infrastructure.
the second part of it is we now have both Keeker through the ARB imposing standards not only on single-family homes, but multiple dwellings and, I guess, regimes or whatever. What you have is now a system that is between the regulation on a building and the regulation on the design and management of the project is separate among the two. Is it working, or is it full of situations that you've just showed us?
Oh, I don't know if I'm the person to answer that. I know
Well,
that they are talking
the question
about what
is-
happens next with ARB.
The question comes down to if we make a proposal and you're looking at the existing system, if it's broken, we gotta fix it. If it's not broken, there's no reason to fix it unless there's a benefit issue that we can rely on. There's a third issue, dealing specifically with the individual rights of the homeowner, as well as the individual rights of the owner of the property at the time of development, which until it's,
But Andy, I think it's got to be measured against the benefit of the community. And right now, there is no system monitoring single-family developments, which could cause,
whoa, what system?
For
You're talking
stormwater.
about building?
the
or
stormwater,
you're
no, the
talking about
stormwater system. Stormwater runoff.
Stormwater. You don't think the Conservancy, not the Conservancy, the KICA is in their flood management plan considering stormwater
Not based on the materials that I received.
on single families after they're built?
No, single families while they're being built.
After they're built, the
Oh, I don't
issue
know.
there.
I don't know that part. We're just talking about building at this point.
Sure they are. The Architectural Review Board has standards.
But not for stormwater.
Not for stormwater.
They have it for construction standards, what they have to do with the property, what they can't do with the property.
Right, but there's nothing about what she was talking about, if there's a pile of concrete and it rains and it runs off. We
How
had-
many situations like that have they encountered? That was the question.
I
One
would
is too
think-
many.
And is it a cost cost management issue, or is it a violation issue that you got to deal with?
So one of the things I do want to address, just community association and their, what I would call, connection to stormwater. How I would phrase it is that really it's more of an end-of-pipe solution. So what our engagement with community association, if a property owner begins to develop their property, they're looking at, can their system hold the runoff from that particular property? And the answer would be yes. Like, they've been able to just have effective, what I would say, capacity or water quantity for what we have on the island. What we are introducing today is, in my mind, how do we, or the question I'm asking you guys as commissioners is, can we, at this particular point, reduce the amount of runoff that enters into the master drainage system from a quantity standpoint? Because I think that's where most of the questions that have just been raised are more about quantity opposed to the quality questions.
No, mine is quality.
Okay, so from a quality standpoint, there is none to my knowledge that community association is enforcing any quality controls regarding stormwater.
Sherry, do you know?
Yeah, that would be news to me. I don't recall anything about that.
And the documentation that we included in your materials really, in my mind, reinforced that the attention that the community association really, I mean, in a great effort, in a great way, is responsive to the outfalls that they manage and trying to improve those systems, being able to have off-site control of some of the maneuver gates and levers, those types of things. Those are all need to be applauded because those are in the right direction. But from a water quality standpoint, there's nothing to my knowledge, that there's anything on the books that the community association is regulating.
So you get back to my point, having realized that there are standards available for at least the design of a property that controls rainwater runoff, have we had legal opinion to understand whether or not there is jurisdiction over individual property owners, given the restrictions in the general covenants of the developer in Article 2, Paragraph 4?
I don't know exactly what Article 2, Paragraph 4
It gives
states.
the right to the homeowner to basically enjoy his property.
And to pollute the waters?
What?
And to pollute the waters?
They still have
It
to,
has nothing to do with the water, it has the property. You cannot manage or control property that's owned by a landowner under the covenants.
they still
But the
need a
town has an
building
obligation to
permit,
protect
they still
property
need
owners.
ARP.
The covenants have been found where there's a conflict with, and we don't have it yet, but if there is an ordinance that's in conflict with the covenant takes precedent, regardless of the ordinance, if it in fact is, quote, a law of the town or entity that is encouraging or proposing it.
So
just-
I
just
think,
to-
John, let me just propose that. I think Andy you've got a question about whether we have any legal jeopardy with this. Well, can you find out from legal counsel if
Yeah, so that was going to be my follow-up. I mean, right now, there isn't a recommendation forth, but I would essentially, and I'm not speaking on behalf of legal counsel not being present, but in my mind, this applies in the same standard that we would apply any zoning ordinance. So it would be
I'm sure there's a
applicable, it
problem with-
would
go
be applicable to any property within the town of Kiowa Island's jurisdiction. With that being said, as any recommendation that's put forth, we would ensure that we have the legal ability to enforce it. So prior to this being approved or recommended,
Well, I'm
we'll
not-
have legal counsel weigh in.
John, I'm not even talking about approval. I'm talking about going through a process where you've got or don't have an understanding of what the authority is, proposing something, putting it out to the public or to the homeowners, and creating a situation where you're either gonna have a big support environment, or you're gonna have a big argumentative environment, which is gonna end up, like a lot of things recently, end up in the conflict of a court. And that's going to not only cost money, it's going to cost time, and you may have overcome in terms of opposition by writing an ordinance, but you're not overcoming the attitude that people are going to have with respect to the ordinance.
Andy, Mount Pleasant's got them, Sullivan's Island's got them, James, don't you think
They don't have the same structure.
In which way?
They don't have homeowners?
They do not have homeowners under a covenant.
I don't think that's right, but I think they do have some that do.
What?
I mean, if you'd say,
There's no there's no restrictive covenant in any of those towns.
We can further research the covenant question, I meant, but if regarding the question of stormwater, is there anything questions-wise that were raised during Patrice's conversation or presentation that you guys had additional kind of questions about before we kind of walk through some of what I would saw the actual recommendations? And the other thing that I would allude to, just as be reminded, the recommendations also follow two things. So one, I mentioned briefly the flood mitigation report, sea level rise report that was done, as well as our comprehensive marsh management plan. So in those two documents itself, recommended that we need to really look at our stormwater regulations. And so this particular process, from staff perspective, is consistent with those recommendations of those two documents. Ideally, when we also did our amendments to our comprehensive plan in 2019, we specifically pointed to recommendations of the flood mitigation and sea level rise report. So I don't find it far-fetched that we go down this route. It's just I've heard Ms. Hennessy's comments of making sure that let's just do it comprehensively today or in this immediate time frame. But really, the guidance that I'm asking from you today, if there are other things regarding the time or at least the comprehensiveness of that, we can begin to have those discussions. What I'm hearing is now let's not approve. I might be jumping ahead, but are there other questions regarding what might be in the framework? Let me ask it that way. What might be in the framework that you guys anticipate us staff investigating further to bring back for you guys?
So John, what I'm hearing you say is you're suggesting tabling this until we can answer those questions, or are you wanting us to approve this amendment so that we create a baseline with DHEC so that we're in some sort of compliance?
That was staff original recommendation, so let's have a starting point. At least this gives us the ability to enforce some things, to get the ball rolling, for lack of better words.
Okay.
I understand the urgency of having greater standards, and that's still part of our initial recommendation. It's just that if that's wanting to be advanced, we're not ignoring that. We just want to be better responsive to the question or concern that was raised.
Again, we're answering a question. We don't have the facts in hand to understand. You've got a 4-page report from the Kika COO explaining their stormwater management program, the flood control program that they've gone through, which was based on the report of the stormwater management group. They're in phase 5 or 6 of that plan. It'll end soon. They control the quantity, and by controlling the quantity, they control the quality.
not true.
Well, when you say quality, what are you talking about?
What's getting into the water?
Where is it coming from? It's coming from the yards.
So that's bad quality.
And is there any regulation, you're talking about pervious and non-pervious, there's ongoing committees talking about that. So we're going to jump the process and jump right ahead because we're going to find what? That one site had concrete parked on the driveway? One site.
No, Andy, that was an
That's the
example.
cost-
That was
that's the
not,
cost
that was not,
management effective.
that was not data, that was an example.
We're going to get to the pervious.
Well, I'm asking,
next.
what other examples do we have? We haven't heard any. And if you read the COO report, they manage water runoff, and they manage it through the lakes and drainage system.
That's what John said. they're managing it in the pipes. And we want to start thinking about maybe something a little bit more globally that,
But that's global, that's what they're doing.
okay.
So basically, the question to the commission is, do you feel comfortable with the information that we have put forth to go for a vote for the zoning amendment? Or do anyone feel, other than Andy, that you need more time?
I would move, I would put I would make a recommendation that we approve we can discuss it, but that we approve the text that's been submitted.
Before we jump there, I'm okay with that, but I just want to make sure everyone is
I don't care
understanding
whether you're
that
okay with
you're
that.
jumping to the actual ordinance opposed to,
Why don't you continue the presentation?
Yeah, get us to the point where I can make that recommendation.
so if there's no more question about stormwater in general or this particular process of where we are.
One question though, John, because I did read the Sullivan's Island and what they've been doing on this. As part of their whole program, it looked like they have retained consulting engineers to look at the systems holistically and then come up with a new plan to regulate it and monitor it. Is there any thought to doing something like that to see whether Charleston County is too conservative, too liberal, or where we're going to wind up on this?
So that's one of the reasons why we didn't want to just rush into having particular standards of metrics rather, of knowing, hey, this is where we are today. I do think it is important for us to collaborate with community association, with Conservancy to understand what might be their concerns from a capacity standpoint if this ordinance does that, just even if they don't have any concerns because they can hold all the stormwater.
And with outside experts as well?
With engineers as well. I mean,
Okay.
the ultimate, I think, end product is for us to have standards that we can enforce internally, whether that be with staff or for greater scaled project, as we see in the recommendation, bringing in an external engineer to assist in those review processes. So as to your question, I think in us using engineers to understand where we are today,
Where we need to be?
and where we need to be, that requires a little bit more homework on our part to really understand what is it that we're trying to achieve specifically from a water quality standpoint, but from a quantity standpoint, that would require us really knowing what the capacity levels are. What's the goal of us reducing? Are we trying to identify a goal to reduce that amount that enters into the master drainage system? Those types of numbers or conversations I think would come out during the next phase of us really beginning to ask those tough questions of the community association. Are there problem areas that we should increase at different portions across the island? I mean, those are
Right.
things that I think are valid questions. Yeah.
I still don't see any need at this time to conclude that there is a quality protection or quality issue with respect to the runoff. I don't see any need to suggest there's a quantity protection needed in runoff based on what's the practice, common practice of the island, operated by both the ARB and in fact by the building code in many respects. There's no need for another ordinance. Everything we want to do today seems to be an ordinance. Why not look at what the practices are and either agree that they're acceptable or they need to be changed and work with the organization or the organizations that are changing it? You don't need an ordinance. We don't have an ordinance for the ARB. We don't have an ordinance. Well, you claim you have one for the trees, but fine. I'm talking about prior to the last 2 years, there haven't been ordinances that control everybody's way of life. And that's what you're doing.
Okay, John, where do you suggest we go from here?
So I hear general comfortability of what's being presented as far as us going down this pathway. So what I would just ask now for the commission to consider the language that has been drafted so far. And that just moves us to I'm going to respond to one question that Mr. Iwan raised is, why would this be section 12-169 in the ordinance? This particular location of 1269 would be a new chapter or a new section in the ordinance, so it's not amending an existing code. But the end goal, at least from a staff perspective, is that we create a stormwater permit process, right? And so this falls into the other sort of process areas that are in our zoning code. The text, as you see, outline the purpose of this article is to provide for review and use of best management practices for stormwater management and construction practices for the purpose of reducing flooding, protecting local water quality, managing storage and treatment of stormwater runoff, reducing pollution to the marsh, reducing erosion, and managing fill as a result of construction activities. So it's somewhat of a comprehensive approach to stormwater, so it's not just, like I mentioned earlier, it's not just quantity, but it does include quality. That's the purpose. If you look at the applicability, what's being proposed is that this would apply to all new construction, exterior remodeling of significant size, of any change in footprint. That would include parking areas and purpose surfaces, and what would be cumulatively anything that exceeds 500 square feet. This would also include anything that's adding fill or recontouring of 20% or more of existing lot area. That's the applicability. So the intent here is to us to really capture as many elements across the island that would essentially result in a stormwater management plan. And then as far as process, what we envision is that this particular would go through our standard review process as someone submits an application through our online Citizen Serve portal, and that would incur a review. At this time, we'll build in the infrastructure as referenced as part of the recommendation. I'm gonna go back to one of the slides here of developing a stormwater management plan application. That specific application would be beginning the process of looking at best management practice, but we already have the infrastructure in place through our online portal to be able to just essentially accept applications, and as part of that zoning review, it would just be an additional resource or document that the applicant is uploading to our existing process. We have listed out what would be submittal requirements. Those particular submittal requirements include whoever is that property owner's professional engineer or landscape architect that is actively licensed in the state of South Carolina, and they're providing essentially a site plan survey illustrating the existing and proposed topographical features of the lot, the existing and proposed drainage flow patterns, and the site narrative that essentially, let me not use that, a site narrative describing the means and methods of preventing adverse impacts to adjacent and or downstream properties, and anything that we would consider reasonable or pertinent to this particular application that by discretion that we can ask for. And I would add that most plans that do come in already have a survey that shows the topo, that shows the grading. So this won't necessarily be a significant, in my mind today, ask for things that are already submitted as part of a development project. It would require the applicant to put some thought into not just saying, hey, this will not adversely impact my neighbors. At the end of the day, once we get to phase 2 or 3 later in this particular process, it's our intent as a recommendation to allow that applicant to begin to choose their methods and strategies based on a bulk of things that we have built into the ordinance. So whether an applicant says, hey, I'm going to install a rain garden into my plans or some other metric, we can have that listed for them that gives them a little bit more guidance to help them in the stormwater management process.
That, John, you're touching on a point that I wanted to get this motion made in order that we could have discussion on it. And the thing that I'm a little bit concerned about is your point 4 under B4, which is other things that are reasonable and pertinent, which are pretty, they're not very concrete. They're very, general kind of opinions or so. What I wanted to understand is and tell me if I'm wrong with this, is that what the staff is proposing is if we put this text in place that would give you the structure to begin to flesh this out with more details so that it is not subjective and this is just a start. It's not the end game, right?
Correct. This is a start. It's not the perfect ordinance in by any means, but it does give us the ability to focus on stormwater during that construction process. It gives us the ability to review stormwater in a meaningful way, I think, but that would be responsive to a lot of the concerns that we've heard.
So in the future, there'd be a place on the internet or in the town where best practices kind of, we would have people, encourage people for the rain gardens and semi-pervious driveways, things like that.
Yeah, so the idea is to make it as flexible, in my mind today, to make it as flexible, so we aren't forcing a homeowner to choose something that does not fit to the context of to their site, right? So there are a lot of different geographic and contextual site differences among properties on Kiowa. So we're not trying to make everyone fit through this one funnel size stormwater requirements or best management practices, and a lot of this has already been alluded to in the Conservancy's nature-based solution. So I mean, I think it's generally understood that the best zoning is local zoning. And so if I use that same analogy, if we can try to localize from a property owner standpoint what they're able to do from a stormwater best management practice, that's the best solution as I see it. That way, someone far east of the end of the island that is adjacent to the marsh might be doing something different on their particular property compared to someone in the center core of the island where it's a little bit more elevated and they're doing something a little bit differently. So to your point, yes, we would have some things that they would be able to choose from that assist us in saying, hey, they are being very attentive to how they're treating stormwater.
Yet the ordinance requires submittal requirements. If you look to 4, you've got a plan that has to be submitted, which you say is somewhat like the topo that you're getting now. But for whatever reason, you're telling us the topo is not sufficient, so you need something more. You also say somebody's got to hire a professional, and it's either going to be an individual or the architect or somebody, but they're going to pay for it. And that cost is going to be passed on to the individual because the topo doesn't give you the information you want. The possibility of stormwater running into the neighbor is not even discussed here, but that could be an issue that you want to consider with the plan. But I'll tell you, there's also in the covenants today, the KICA covenants, there's the right of the neighbor, if there's an issue, to sue the homeowner. And that's where the right runs, or that's where the responsibility runs. If they are bothered by stormwater runoff, they can turn around and they can sue the neighbor. They both are individual owners, have rights, and they are exercised that way. The town this doesn't set anything up with that regard, except that you're you're imposing a cost on the homeowner, which is going to raise the price and it'd be inconsistent totally with the overall goal of maintaining the values here on the island.
John, I have a couple of questions on the ordinance itself.
Can I just
you
respond?
wanna answer
One
his?
thing that Mr. Curran that just pointed out, Patricia just shared with me, I wanted to just allude to, this goes back to also questions of such other reasonable and pertinent information that might be collected. She just shared the town of Sullivan's. We really utilize that as one of what I thought was a good model. But they list out, as I mentioned, a lot of things that are already being submitted by an applicant. So one, a scaled site plan, spot elevation of low points, DHEC OCRM critical line or baseline setback line, particular easements, existing and proposed structures including setbacks, the location of trees to be removed, existing and proposed stormwater drainage facilities, downspouts, pipes, catch basins. et cetera. Bulkheads, proposed impervious surfaces such as driveways, patios, parking areas, proposed drainage flow patterns, construction details of proposed stormwater drainage facilities. A lot of these things are already being done. It's just us having the ability to review them in a comprehensive way is the approach. So I just wanted to kind of list some of those things that we would incur. I'm gonna get to you, Ms. Hennessy. I just wanted to respond to the question regarding legality of adjacent property owner filing suit against someone upstream from them. That can happen today. And in my mind, this allows us to be in a better position as a community so that we avoid things like that. That doesn't say that a property owner can't do that, but this allows us to at least have a greater ability to say the town is responsive to flooding, and we're doing something and not just turning a blind eye to it. So it is.
So again, if it's not broke, don't fix it. How many situations have we had where neighbors sued the next door neighbor for water runoff?
I mean, that,
Do we know?
I don't know the answer to that
No, You
question.
know, again, this whole thing is being presumably put forth because somebody has an idea that they're gonna improve the state on the island. When you turn around and look at it, you got a stormwater management plan it's in place and improved on by Kika, the landowner. You've got individual rights of the landowners that are maintaining their properties. There's no question that the quality of the maintenance on the island is fairly high, if not excellent, whatever standard you want to use. And what you're doing is adding what looks like only an administrative requirement for a review by an engineer who's going to be not only costing the homeowner additional funds, it might change the value of the real estate on the island, and more importantly, there's nothing broken. So what are we fixing?
Why would that?
Okay.
I apologize, Ms. Hennessy.
Yeah,
Okay, Joanne's
okay.
question.
Or what?
I have to, I have a couple of questions on the ordinance. First of all, I want to say I support, what you're talking about, and I'm not sure I see something in here about during construction, preventing runoff of construction detritus, that made it the wrong word, into the marsh. Okay, that's an important thing for all of us, and I think isn't being done now, and there are lots of examples of piles of concrete. Anybody who walks around the island sees it, so it's.
Baloney. That's baloney.
Okay,
Okay,
let's be
you can
civil.
disagree with me.
Concrete,
Can you let her finish?
Okay, we can agree to disagree, Andy, that's
All right.
fine. But my point is, I support limiting not only stormwater runoff, but as Larry mentioned, the quality of it, that's important. I think it's something to do. On the ordinance itself, add, fill, or recontouring 20% or more of existing lot areas. I'm concerned with doing a percentage because you might have a triple lot on Helena Court, where there's some really big houses going up on the east end of the island versus some of the cottages or smaller lots who might want to knock down and renovate that might be impacted. So can we think about, rather than a percentage, should there be an absolute amount? I don't know the answer, but I'm concerned that percentage might mean you could do a whole bunch of things without it falling under this on a large lot, where on a small lot, they would be impacted. So something to think about. The other question I had, I don't know how landscape architects are certified. Are they certified? But no, I mean in terms of qualifications, are they qualified to judge stormwater runoff and quality of stormwater runoff? I don't know the answer to that, and that was just a question.
The state does give them that authority, whether individually they know about it or not. But if you're a licensed landscape architect, you're allowed to submit stormwater.
As long as they understand it.
And that's a distinction I've seen made in other towns in their regulations. They refer to registered landscape architects versus licensed architects. Maybe we need to clarify on that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know good point. And then they said, there was, as it's for, on 4B4, the intent of this article to ensure compliance with DHAC and the town of Kiowa Island standards. So I think that's where it enables us to have stricter standards because DHAC, it came out on the last stormwater management engineer report that the DHAC wasn't strict enough because of their backward, their long historical perspective, and that's not relevant to current environmental issues.
Yeah, so you're right. That adding the town and Kiowa standards allows us to do that. Yeah.
Add one other point to it. In section 3A, right, planning director may consult with an external engineer. The whole Weston Sampson thing again comes out. Should we make that it's mandatory consultation on projects over a certain scope?
That could be considered. I think because we listed it pursuant to section 162, which we just made the amendments that we have qualified greater size, I think the intent was for us to kind of go with that parameter as just a policy, but if we bake that language in, I'm comfortable with that language.
It seems like they're more complex projects that require a higher level of expertise.
They vary, I meant from project to project, but I don't have a significant sort of one way or the other.
John, are you comfortable for
But
me?
let me make sure, the number one reason I said that, because I want to make sure that because costs are associated with that, we don't have a particular mechanism right now, that would be something town council would need to make sure that if we are consulting with an external, the cost of those things, that I'm not allowing the planning commission to burden the town in pursuing a cost outcome. So that's one of the reasons there.
An impact fee? An impact fee?
You'll see that in my updates at the end
You
of
got pretty
today's
far with
meeting.
that, didn't you?
Larry has a question, comment?
Yeah, John, are you now comfortable with me making a motion?
Go for it, Mr. Iwan.
I move that we adopt the language of 12-169 as presented by the town, by the staff.
For what purpose?
So that it's adopted in the town code.
Adopting an ordinance? Or you,
Yeah, I'm making a recommendation that we do it.
considering the agenda calls for discussion,
That's the point. The point is the discussion comes after a motion is made in a second. Well, I don't have a second yet.
well, you're calling on commission to adopt an ordinance.
To
for which-
recommend the adoption.
For which there is little, if any, support in terms of evidence on the issues.
Is there a
Can we
second?
follow the
Yeah.
protocol?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Larry just made a motion.
Larry's made a motion.
Um,
Need a second if we
Like
move
to-
forward.
do a addendum to the 20%?
Okay, first, I'll second the motion, and then we can discuss. And, that 20%, I'm not ready to say what the right answer is, but I would ask that it be reviewed, because if someone in Inlet Cove is knocking down and doing their house, 20% of their lot might be this much, and they're subject to this, whereas you go to a big lot, and they might make major changes that that impact stormwater management, but it wouldn't be 20%. So that's just
Yeah, the
a
outside-
detail.
I
The
think
outside
that,
limit
that's
is
an
1 acre.
excellent point. Living on a small lot, I think that's an excellent point.
Yeah, it just, rather than a percentage, maybe, and I don't know the right answer, maybe
Well, I mean,
somebody can
in
help us with
the
that.
section above, it says 500 square feet, so
That's if the addition is more than 500 square feet. But the point too is adding fill and recontouring. And I just think that needs to be thought about a little bit, is what the right answer is.
Yeah, I don't want to provide a response now, but I think in general, my first initial is that you'll see new construction adding fill. There's not probably a lot of renovations that will be adding fill. There might be a few instances of recontouring for large additions, but we can provide a
Yeah, I
look at
don't know
that.
the answer, but, I would be comfortable approving this subject to further.
Subject to, exactly. Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. We have any discussion of anything that hasn't surfaced yet?
Now you gotta make your
Oh, okay, then I make a motion that we
Amend.
well, I don't know what to amend it to, that we consider the language
Miss-
of the 20
Yeah, just
prior-
from a procedure standpoint, what guys can approve as is with the caveat that staff will review further,
Contingent.
knowing that that would not come back to you guys, but we'll at least have information as part of what that, put 20%. Now, if you guys want, we can,
I mean, would it be better if we changed it to more of a general term at this point, and then sort of just say a significant, significant area of the existing lot?
Or something in Table X, and we haven't figured out what Table X is yet. I don't know the right way to do it, but,
If
Either
you
that
do
or-
it, you'd probably do A1, and leave the 20% where it is.
yeah, I'm not
well,
comfortable
we
with
can,
the 20%.
the other thing I think you could potentially do is just leave it discretionary, so
Yeah, or if the planning director.
Seems necessary, yeah.
deems necessary to, something to that.
Yeah, thinks that the change in contouring is going to impact the quality or quantity of runoff, something
Yeah.
like that.
Well
And
said.
that we're also going to have, the town of Kiowa standards have to be defined at some point.
Yep, that would be in our intention, and that would come back before you guys, so that would come back in the next phase.
Okay. Any other comments before we vote?
I don't have a second yet. Oh, no, I
There you
do.
do, there you do.
Yeah, I'm always, got your back, Larry.
So I want to clear just on the proposed amendment, it's just looking at A2 to modify that to give flexibility, to not be a hard rigid 20%, but allow discretion. We'll come up with the exact language, but I want to make sure I capture
Yeah,
that.
to allow-
Significant area of
Okay.
the lot that, that the planning director sees.
Deems would impact quality or quantity of stormwater runoff.
Okay.
Somebody needs to second your motion. Amended.
Second?
Okay, we have a second to her amendment. Okay. All those in favor?
First, we vote on the
Gotta do
amendment.
first.
We got to vote on the amendment first.
All those in favor of the amendment that Joanne has presented?
Aye.
No,
You got one opposed, okay.
Now, and you vote on as
And now we'll,
amended.
Now we'll vote on
and now we'll
Larry's.
vote on the actual text amendment.
As amended.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay.
Thank you all.
John, you gonna stay up there for any additional comments on the pervious parking?
What I want to do is first set the stage here regarding pervious and impervious requirements. So today is just, number one, a discussion. Planning staff would like just to hear the planning commission's thoughts and feedbacks on a few concepts that have been presented somewhat publicly, but more so, these have been discussed as part of the marsh management plan. There is an established subcommittee that have been looking at pervious and impervious requirements. The marsh management plan in itself and that work group is really wanting to set a stage of a dual-prong approach of incentives and regulatory changes. As we have presented at our most recent town council retreat, we presented at least one framework of potential, what we would say further investigated or at least provided at least some thoughtful fruit of true evidence of great incentive program. And this is what was shared with you guys regarding what occurred in Ocean Woods regarding to their driveways. That was a community champion-led initiative that they received a reduction in costs with the installer, the contractor, based on that entire neighborhood converting their asphalt driveways to permeable pavers. And so as part of regulatory changes, on the other side of the coin, opposed to incentives, we are looking at now permeable requirements as far as driveways and parking elements. And so staff has prepared a few thoughts. And so I'm going to walk through those and just kind of engage some discussion here and sort of hear next steps. And we have a subcommittee meeting with our pervious, impervious subgroup of our marsh management plan this Friday So the conversations that you guys share today, I want to be able to share with them, and we essentially will be bouncing ideas, but ultimately, we'll come back with a recommendation from this commission that will go ultimately to town council for approval. So staff has some ideas, and what I want to do is what you see right now as our opportunities and pathways slide that we've laid out. On the far left is listed as various incentives. That driveway replacement program refers to what was that modeled in Ocean Woods. And so we've, as a community, both the community association, the town have pushed out articles and features regarding what was done in Ocean Woods. And we're trying to gain some traction of allowing other regimes, other neighborhoods to take that same approach to do it independently of any regulation, right? Because it's a good effort to reduce the amount of impervious surfaces across the entire island. Those other things that are listed there, you see rain barrels and rain gardens, that's still a continued effort. It just requires a little bit more coordination between entities that we're studying. And the third being financial grants or expedited permitting processes. What the staff had outlined as part of that driveway incentive program did include some financial resources as well as expedited permitting processes. Question?
Yeah, just, would you put this in context for me? Are we talking, where would these, like the permeable driveway requirements, would it end up in our zoning code?
Yes.
Okay, but the incentives would not, because those are town programs.
Right.
So what we're looking at right now are things that we're gonna modify our zoning code with.
Correct, yes. So that highlights on the incentive side, right? So there's not a lot of avenues or at least direct impact from the incentive side. We're continuing this effort, don't get me wrong, the Conservancy, the town, Community Association, our Marsh Madness Work Group, and our communications team, we continue to promote all of the efforts of that are recommendations that are coming out of our subcommittee and work group. But there is the other side of the coin of how do we really get the bang for our buck in an effort to reduce our overall impervious surfaces across the island. And that comes with regulatory changes. So this is unlike any other recommendation that I've outlined that has come from our marsh management plan, which it strictly stated that we ought to strictly limit impermeable surfaces and formalize stormwater best management practices for private properties. That justification was outlined in our marsh management plan. So what we're presenting today is in lockstep of what those recommendations are. So I just wanted you guys to be aware of that. Where we are as far as recommendations wise, we've looked at many communities. We've listed a few here that already have regulations on the books that look at impervious or pervious requirements for either driveways or parking. We understand where we are today that providing as much data on these particular elements is very important to buy-in. That has not stopped. We're working with the Kiowa Conservancy. Lee Bundrick has working on a GIS project that essentially is able to measure where we are as the island, how much impervious cover we are. So that's looking at rooftops, looking at driveways, looking at roadways, and seeing how much impervious cover we have across the island. It is a little bit challenging at some points because we do have a ton of tree canopy on the island, but it at least gives us an idea of benchmark of where we are. And so as a community, this sets the stage of what we can at least set a goal as part of this particular process. And as we learn more about where we are as a benchmark, I think will be more appropriate stage or posture to set a goal island-wide to say by X date, we want to be able to reduce our impervious surfaces by this percentage. And so that's part of staff's premise of why we think it's important to consider some of this particular language. And that also just measures our success. And so it's not feeling arbitrary. We can able tangibly measure our results. So when it comes to actual driveways requirements, I'm going to outline just a few things here, and then I'll go to the parking side, and then we'll kind of open it up for some loose discussion. So considering Kiowa's entering into a redevelopment stage, many of our single-family homes, if we were to move in this direction, this would naturally follow a redevelopment process. So staff is not recommending that anyone who has a great driveway in place today, that they rip that driveway up. But as new development occurs or redevelopment in a major way, and they're doing substantial renovations, this would say, hey, that driveway now needs to become permeable surface. Additionally, based on our current code, whether a driveway is permeable or not, it still counts towards their lot coverage. So that might seem as a negative sort of impact, that why would I convert my driveway to a permeable material even though it's counting towards my lot coverage? I think this sets the stage of just wanting the community to set a new normal in a good effort way. And I echo our council woman Kay, who always says that this is trending in the right way, of where Kiowa, in a sense, has a better conscious of its environment. We've always had a conscious effort to respect the environment, but this now marries into that of allowing us to reduce the amount of impervious coverage. As mentioned, many other municipalities are already having driveways constructed with pervious elements. And then we've also think it's important as part of this process to ease the property owners' permitting review and permitting processes, that we engage with the ARB, because there are some aesthetic components to permeable driveways that we want consistent with the character of Kiowa. And so we think in the best interest that as we develop this ordinance, that we have product types that we can easily point to and direct property owners and design teams that, hey, these are what the ARB would naturally approve of because it's in the same character of what's existing. And so we think consulting with the Key Architecture Review Board, who's a part of this subgroup already of our marsh management plans, so they're aware of this particular stage. The other component to this that's important as we consider is the maintenance of particular product types. So in order to maintain the effectiveness of some of these product types, they have to be properly installed, but additionally properly maintained. I'll give you a few examples of where you have permeable pavers. Those pavers allow the spacing in between for water to trickle down into the groundwater table. But if those areas are clogged and it's not allowing that water to seep through, then now we have issues. And so periodically, how do we either enforce or at least ensure that they're being installed properly, but ensure that there's a regular pattern of maintenance, that those things are being properly considered as to maintain its permeable feature. And then the final thing that's listed on the part of the slide is for the staff to continue to at least educate or at least help educate the community. And this is working with the private sector to understand the costs. We understand that that is a concern that has been raised in our subcommittee, is that there are implications of product types where if it's a requirement, well, this asphalt or concrete driveway is much less cost than me putting in gravel or some other product type. How does that weigh in and this getting buy-in from the community? And so I know that we've reached out to a few contractors, a part of that subcommittee. There was one installer who's graciously provided in an effort to continue the efforts that were done by Ocean Woods. We actually got a price per square foot of a particular change. So that just helps us understand what this might be. But I just wanted to lay out to you guys part of the nuance that you should be considering as you have some discussion and making a recommendation. When we shift to parking requirements, very similar cost implications, but the difference, I think, in staff's recommendation is that I think there's a greater opportunity for flexibility with parking, because there are a number of things that you can scale. We have different size developments, different homes, whether it be commercial, whether it be regime or multifamily. There's different things that you could do from a scalable or standard standpoint. What we've seen in other municipalities or communities is that some of it is percentage of parking spaces. Some of it is all as parking spaces. We've been using what's been done at the Sandcastle as sort of our example of sort of if someone's asking, well, what does a permeable parking area look like? What's done at the Sandcastle is sort of that example that we point people to. And so hypothetically, what if that is now the new parking technology from a product standpoint? It doesn't have to be exactly that, but if that's the common thread upon areas of large-scale parking areas across the island, imagine the impact from a benefit standpoint of all of those areas now not being asphalt or concrete, becoming permeable.
Can I ask a question? So what, again, using Sandcastle as an example, what is the maintenance requirement for that parking lot? What do they do? How often do they have to do it?
That's a good question. I don't have the answer to that. Their gaps are much larger than just the standard paver. So grass actually is able to grow in between those pavers, but we can get the answer specifically for that question.
In general, it's usually about once a year.
And what do they do? Just,
They vacuum it out.
just vacuum?
Oh, it's a vacuum, okay.
Because I always think that you'd get sediment, dirt, you know.
And, yeah, so you vacuum it out. So from a regime standpoint, if like Ocean Woods, because they kind of went in at the same time, then, you know, the regime could say, oh, we're gonna maintain these once a year, we're gonna have somebody, have them come on the island and vacuum it out. I know some municipalities, when they've gone to using this on their own facilities, they've actually purchased the vacuum.
So no, that kind of concludes most of what we're thinking as far as a recommendation, whether it's requirement for all. I'll give you just some loose thinking of where we are as a staff. If all parking areas are required to be permeable, if it's anything over the required minimum to be permeable right now, and that's just discretionary that's listed, which most of those have already been permeable in application, but if it becomes a requirement of all parking, if it's a certain size, those are the types of things that I kind of want to hear just some general discussion from you guys, and we can begin to formulate something more structured for you to review next month, but you want to begin at least having some conversations here. So I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Well, I think you've obviously given us a lot to think about, and I think as you drive around the island, you see more and more of these pervious driveways. Whether it will be embraced by some people, the new homeowners, new builders, that's to be decided. I don't know. But obviously, the more building that's going on, we're seeing a lot of concrete being poured. I was out at the Ocean Park last week, and I think I counted something close to 25 homes going up. If you start from the first home, and go all the way around to the front, what they call the front nine, it's an amazing amount of construction that's going on. So I think it's worthwhile to look at something of this nature and see if this is something we want to consider for the future. Any other comments? Joanne?
Yeah, I think you're right that Kiowa people in general are very environmentally conscious. And so I don't think you would need to do an offset in terms of lot coverage, because that sort of defeats the purpose of creating more pervious surface. I thought of something when you're talking about measurement. I think it's intuitively obvious probably that the more pervious surface, the better, because it enables the water to go down into the ground as opposed to running off different places. I don't think you're going to be able to measure it based on where we are now to where we're going because of new construction. I've been trying to get a handle on the number of still buildable lots, because you may have added 6 pervious driveways, but you've built 1 new house. So that's going to affect, if you try and use that metric for your success, it's not going to work. So I wouldn't worry so much about the metric for success because of new construction. I think we should consider something about pervious surfaces and how we can do it with regulation to either encourage or require in certain instances. Not sure yet what the right answer is.
Yeah, just one comment on the metric. It was really started as a question of us selling this to town council initially, understanding like, where are we? When we look at Kiowa's total acreage, what percentage is covered by imperviousness? So we might have some wiggle room of what new construction offsets versus what has changed, but it's really just understanding where we are as a baseline of this is in 2024, we have 30% impervious surfaces across the island. It could be lower, I'm just throwing a number there. But if we are environmentally conscious in a way that's responsive, can we ideally set a goal that say, well, in 2024, by some X factor, and there's some formulas that we can play in GIS to aggregate based on new construction. That requires a little bit more homework, but.
Like 24 homes in Ocean Park, there's a lot of driveways.
So, I hear you there.
I think this is going to require a lot of education. Pops in my mind. I mean, I remember going to my grandfather's home and he had a pervious driveway and had weeds growing up through it. And so my first image of the pervious is the driveway with weeds growing up through it. So I think, what are the products? What are the durability? What are the maintenance? I think there's just, it's good. If you could do something like you did with the rain garden, where you can create a couple actual examples. One of the thoughts that occurred to me is, can Kika change some of their non-permeable surfaces into an example of a permeable usage? Bike path or something where.
Sandcastle.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
I did not mention that, but in our list, you see there are non-primary trails in that
Okay.
center column. So that was already contemplated that we potentially reach out to the community association and say, hey, those non-primary trails where it's safe to do it, and they're already kind of naturally doing this in some areas. If you notice on some of the areas that are closer out to the marsh, they're already.
The boardwalks, the entries to the boardwalks, they can be transferred too.
Sure.
Arcadia, the Arcadia Park has bike paths that, was it Roosevelt? I wasn't Roosevelt, it was one of the philanthropists. They compacted it down and you can ride bikes on it. It seems like you're riding on a firm surface. So, I mean, if you can get some of those examples out there, I think it's going to take a lot of education for people like me who see, have old visions of what that used to be.
And we're all old.
That are old, yeah.
I thought what you said about the weeds growing up through it, in my mind, I never would have thought you just vacuum it.
Yeah.
And, because I could envision people out there with their weed killer.
Exactly.
Sure.
Pouring it all over the driveway.
And we don't want that.
Right, which creates a new problem.
That's right.
Yeah,
This may shock someone, but I am in pretty much full support of the work.
I think it shocked six
the
other
work of
people.
the-
I think it's shocking six other people.
The work of the Marsh Management Subcommittee that's been studying this for over a year. They also list, both in the parking requirements and the driveway requirements, substantial study that needs to be done, consider going forward on anything in any way.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see that finished the way it's supposed to be, because town council has decided, they have a resolution that the town would implement the marsh management plan. So there's not a question of if, well, it's a question of when and how. The other part of it is, there is or was, under the resolution that they adopted, the opportunity to use a committee of all the Ks, if you will, a representation from all the Ks on the committee, the subcommittee that would report again to the big committee, the whole committee, and then in turn make a recommendation to the council, who would then approve or disapprove the recommendation. That process has been violated. It's been violated, first it was violated on the rainwater discussion we just had. It's being violated here by jumping the gun before they even finish the work that they're supposed to do. I don't see why there's any,
How
other
many-
than support for this, why there's any need to do it until they finish their work. Let them do it. That's the way it was designed. There's no, I mean, we got a 10-year, presumably a 10-year plan that can be amended any time after the 10 years, but you got 10 years to work on this. Let them do it right. I don't see any way you're gonna get, if you tell everybody they gotta put in a new driveway and it's gonna be a pervious driveway, that's one thing. That's a mandate. You may run half the people off the island, but you may do it. The other part is, give them the options, give them the information, give them the incentives to do it. People are gonna replace driveways. Most of us in the older section, short of Ocean Park, have done it and are continuing to do it. And even the contractors understand the concept. There's a lot of misunderstanding of what pervious and impervious is, even among the task force, as we found out, and they're still learning it. So my recommendation, John, at this point, is to finish the job with the task force that's in place and let them come up with a recommendation.
Are there other comments or thoughts?
I guess the only thing that goes against that is the fact that, there's a lot of, as Bill said, there's a lot of development going on now and in the near future. And if we don't have a plan and we're waiting and waiting, that development's all gonna go on and we're gonna have more impervious parking lots and driveways. So I guess I would say maybe there is some incentive to moving forward.
Sure.
Well,
I'll
in
just say,
fact, there is.
from my perspective, in my association, we saw what Ocean Woods did, and we thought it was a great idea. We're a little bit different. We don't have as many, we don't really have the standard parking spaces that Ocean Woods had. And I'm on the association board, and one of our board members was waiting to see what the town was gonna put forth in terms of this issue. And then she finally just decided, no, I'm gonna just go out to the community and see what kind of interest there is in doing this, because she just didn't, we don't wanna wait. We look at our neighborhood and we see a lot of the driveways, not in terrible condition, but they're in a state where, there's gonna need to be work. And in some cases, it may not be the entire, a lot of our driveways are really driveways, parking areas. The driveway only goes so far, and then the rest of it goes underneath the cottage.
Exactly.
You've got the
Yep.
same issue. And a lot of times, it's that initial entryway that becomes the problem. The part under the cottage seems to hold up a lot
Sure.
better. And so people are now thinking about, well, can we just at least do the entry pad and give it a fresh new look?
So, Joe, what you're saying is really that the individual homeowners or group of homeowners on their own are gonna get to the point where they're improving or replacing their driveway with
Well,
pervious.
right now, our board member is trying to do a survey of our community to see what level of interest is out there, to see if we would have enough people to perhaps go to a contractor and say, what kind of deal can you give us?
Okay.
This is one, I think, that is a no-brainer from a standpoint of the population, knowing that they're gonna be replacing, if there's a method to do it and a recommendation with maybe some incentives or not, it's gonna get done. But let the process work. It's not that critical. If people wanna do it in advance or wanna do it, they can do it as Ocean Woods did it, or any other way. I mean, there's no restriction on how they're gonna do it. But clearly, the message is out there, if you're gonna change to pervious.
It's interesting, we're talking about homes, but just think of how many miles of concrete are on the cart paths on the golf courses on this island.
Yeah.
We're talking many, many miles.
Or asphalt on the bike paths.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Sanctuary everywhere, yeah.
Okay, John, thanks for that update. You've given us a lot to think about. Appreciate that. You want to move into your staff comments and update us on those items?
Sure. I'll be sending a copy of this out. Daniel's just bringing you just a highlight of what I'm going to read through briefly, but we'll send this out, just sort of a monthly update.
Thanks,
What I want
Daniel.
to start with is just yesterday's town council meeting on pending ordinances that you all have provided recommendation on. As you're aware, 2 of 3 ordinances were for second reading. That first one being temporary uses. There were some modifications made to that ordinance, essentially granting a little bit more discretion to the planning director, given removal of trees for a staging area, construction area, granted those trees are replaced. And then the other one was our site plan review ordinance, section 12-162, that approved, that receives final reading, where the cumulative 20,000 square feet was approved and for non-residential developments, and so multifamily, anything more than 7 units will require planning commission review. That did remove planning commission's authority to approve those documents or approve those site plans. So if a particular application meets those requirements, we would only be bringing that for you guys to review and comment. You guys won't be making a approval for those particular development projects. The third ordinance reading was actually first reading for impact fees. There was a lot of discussion. Ultimately, that ordinance was disapproved by town council, so there were no changes to the impact fee section. There are 2 things that I want to highlight. One being, there's conversations again yesterday at town council meeting regarding Main Road corridor. If you recall, I also sent you guys that information regarding segment C, the Main Road corridor. That particular project is still under the comment period, which ends on the 14th. We do encourage you guys to submit comments, encourage your neighbors in the community to submit comments, as was echoed at yesterday's town council meeting. Regarding site plan review, that's actually on the first page of your documents. Staff did issue sort of a refreshed set of comments for the projects on Beach Walker, which include West End, Ocean Pines, the Cape Point extension. That says, and then you flip on the second page there, MUSC, just an update regarding MUSC, that particular project. It's nearing what I would say site plan review approval. There are still a couple more hurdles for MUSC to jump over. One is getting their encroachment permit from the town of Seabrook Island. That has a tentative planning commission date. That's approval to be scheduled. And then working through the architectural review board with their landscape plan. And so we're still working with MUSC to get them through site plan review. We also have a number of cases before BZA that may not concern you too much. What I did want to just mention regarding our landscape and tree preservation board, as well as the phase 2 of our ordinance. So the board itself now has a full complement of members. Town council did approve appoint the 2 vacant seats on that particular board. They'll be installing their officers, electing their officers at the end of this month and establishing their rules of procedure. So that process is beginning to work. And phase 2 of landscape standards, Patria will be leading that effort, working with a group to look at phase 2 landscape standards. She's pulled together a team of stakeholders to help with that particular process. So I'll stop there because I think most of everything's been covered. That concludes my staff comments.
Excuse me, John, are the issued comments that were done June 3rd, are they on the website if we want to read them?
Yes, they're on the website. I did have a chat with Mr. Connolly just briefly before this meeting, so I'll double check, but he said there was an issue, but those are posted online, but
They are there now?
they're,
Okay.
I haven't checked again,
Oh,
but
okay,
we'll ensure, but yeah.
I'd like to
We'll, they have been
For the new developments.
notified, though, yes.
John, comment on the
Cape Point
impact
Road was
fees?
on it, but the ocean,
What, did you say it did not change at all from the draft we reviewed?
I was looking.
So
last time.
essentially, town council voted to disapprove the recommendation, meaning that they did not see a reason to move forward with us modifying that particular language, as they don't see council, our legal counsel also weighed in that we don't envision the town collecting impact fees based on our structure, based on the development and our pattern. So there was essentially no change to
Okay,
the
that
ordinance.
answered the question, thank you.
Okay, thanks, John. Public comments. Sherry, you got a gold star for sitting through 4 hours of town council yesterday. Well, I was there with you, so I don't know, but what does that say about me?
I love meetings that I don't have to contribute to. I just get to listen and learn.
All right.
But I have a little bit to contribute today. The villages, I'm going to talk about pervious surfaces. The
Gotta tell you,
villages
we
and
got,
cottages.
we know who you are, but for the record, you got to,
I'm Sherry Gallagher. I live at 119 Spartina Court. I am on the Kika board, but I am not speaking for the board today, only a little bit. The regimes of the villages and cottages have reformed a council. It existed a while back, but they have reformed again to have a village and regime council where the presidents of those regimes get together to share information, to talk about things that are affecting them, and hopefully build on the group mentality. And John approached the group with this pervious surface idea, very receptive to it because of the success of Ocean Woods. And you really should build on that momentum while it's fresh. People love it. It looks beautiful. People don't really know that the sandcastle is a pervious surface. Please tell everybody about that, because frankly, I didn't know. And it's beautiful and well-maintained. So if we can keep this momentum going, I really encourage you to do that now while it's fresh and people are very supportive of it. And the Regime Council is really someplace to start. All those cottage neighborhoods could really benefit by all doing it together, looking streamlined and cohesive. So I encourage you to keep going. Thank you.
Thanks, Sherry.
And any other ideas that you think, I'm the liaison from Kika to that council, and I'm happy to transfer anything that you think that they may benefit from your perspective. I'm happy to pass along.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
For commissioner comments, I'd like to go first. And I want to formally welcome John Conley to our planning commission. John's been on the island for 15 years full-time. He's been a member of Kika. He's served on various committees, and he really has a wealth of knowledge and information about this island, as well as he's been monitoring and watching the planning commission. We had 5 good candidates, and we had a panel of 4 which did the interviews, including a member of town council, Luke, which was kind of fun because Luke was interviewing to see who replaced himself. So he did a great job. So John, we're so pleased to have you, and thank you for accepting this position.
Thank you very much.
And starting with commissioner comments, what we do each month, if you have anything to comment, and we'll start with you.
Well, I'll just say I'm honored to be here, and I really look forward to the opportunity to be of value. And day one, I'm sort of overwhelmed with the volume of information, but I'll get there.
Super, I know you will. Gene?
Welcome, John. Just want to let committee members know that I will be away for the next 3 meetings. Our kids are getting married out in Colorado, so more important matters to attend to. I will be back. In the meantime, my contact information is online. If people need to reach me, plenty of ways to get a hold of me. Thank
Okay,
you.
we'll be Zooming you.
Yeah, I'll be up on the big screen
And you're old enough to have children and get married, guys.
Slightly.
I'm telling you.
at a very young age.
All right. Larry?
No comments.
No comments. Joanne?
No comments.
Nothing to
Dr.
add.
Kern? And you changed seats on us this time.
I did, I heard John very clearly this time.
Any comments, Andy?
I have one. I wouldn't want to disappoint you by not saying something. I'd like to understand the current actions of the council with respect to their role versus the planning commission versus the need to do things on the island outside of, if you will, ordinances. Does everything have to be in ordinance? I'd like to understand where they're going with this, and especially in areas where it affects individual properties and individual property rights. And secondly, obviously, the differences between what they believe their role is versus what KICA role is understood to be, and get that hashed out in public before we start writing rules and writing ordinances that challenge each other. Let's get this thing clarified. It's one of the points that was in the draft, the last draft anyway, of the comprehensive plan that I saw. And I'd like to make sure that they understand what that is, and not only is our recommendation accepted, but it's implemented in a way that the island starts to operate effectively as one, as opposed to fighting each other.
Fair enough, fair enough.
And secondly, in addition to fighting each other, spending a boatload of money where it's not necessary.
Okay. No other comments? We'll have a motion to adjourn
So moved.
and a second.
Second.
Thank you, folks. We're adjourned.